Hello and welcome to the Federal. You're watching a program in which we have been conducting a series of interviews to mark 100 years of the RSS. As you would know that the RSS has been celebrating its centenary year for several months now, and this centenary year will run up to September-October 2026. Now, we have been looking at various aspects of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. Now, one of the most notable things that which we have all noticed ever since, the RSS acquired a far greater public space from the mid 1980s, when it launched the Ram Janmabhoomi or the Ram Temple agitation. From that time, we have been actually noticing a very contentious relationship of the RSS and all its affiliated organizations and the shaping or the interpretation of Indian history. They seek a very homogeneous kind of a Indian Hindu nation, which influences their view of history as a continuous struggle against foreign invaders. This foreign invaders is a constant point which they keep on harping upon. So we will be talking about the Sangh, as the RSS likes to call the entire fraternity, the Sangh Parivar, as we in the media often designate it. So we'll be talking about the Sangh, Hindutva, and history. And for that, I have turned to one of the most eminent historians of the country, Professor Aditya Mukherjee, who's no stranger to public discourse, someone who has written several books on history. Welcome to this program, Professor Mukherjee.
Thank you.
Let me begin with one speech which has been delivered by somebody who is actually not part of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh or any of its affiliates. At least that is what we would like to believe. That is the National Security Advisor of India, that is Mr. Ajit Doval. Now, in one of the speeches, a public speech which he delivered very recently, he said that we have to, and I'm quoting him, Aditya, we have to avenge our history, create strong India in every aspect. Now, this entire idea, you as a historian, it can be argued that history is always full of things, when they have avenged the past. People have always come and, changed what happened previously. So what's wrong with Mr. Doval saying that we have to avenge our history? I would like your response on that.
There are two things which are wrong. Firstly, it's the business of historians to talk about history, not of politicians. And increasingly, that is the tendency. It's politicians do not bother either to read or listen to what historians have said for decades, but announce their own view. And secondly, especially the National Security Advisor, that he should say that the right thing to do is to avenge is disastrous. And what he's trying to do is to break up the country further. And who are you going to avenge? And knowing their understanding of history, the people who they want to avenge are not the imperialists, not the British. They want to avenge the Muslims, which is 200 million in number in India. I mean, you're going to take revenge with them. This is what the basis on which, in fact, this person who started the genocide watch, I'm just skipping his name for a moment, Gregory Stanton, he said
Yes.
the direction in which India is moving, the hatred that is being spread about a very large minority. He's the man, by the way, who anticipated the Rwandan massacre, the genocide.
Right.
And he's saying, and he said it to the US Congress, that what we fear is that what in the direction India is moving is going to be probably one of the worst civil wars or genocides in history. You see, I mean, it is not a small matter that the National Security Advisor should be saying that we should take revenge. And what is the message going down to the street? What you are witnessing today, people catching hold of any Muslim that they can see and jumping on their chest and say, Jai Shri Ram, or putting cow dung in the mouth of a pastor and insisting that he sings Jai Shri Ram. And is that what we are talking about? And is that national security? My God, I'm astonished.
Well, from the National Security Advisor, I am moving to the Prime Minister of India, in the sense that my conversation is in this particular phase is going to involve this Prime Minister. Now, as you would know, that very recently a Somnath Swabhiman Parv was celebrated, or rather commemorated, with great enthusiasm just in the month of early days of January 2026 to mark, quote unquote, 1,000 years of the first purported attack on the Somnath temple in Gujarat's Junagadh district. Now, this Parv, it was a 3-4 day long event in which there were several programs, functions. The Prime Minister also participated. He also delivered, besides participating in various functions, like he led a yatra, so typical to the Hindutva campaign, right from the Ekatmata Yajna and the Ekatmata yatras, which were taken out in 1983-84. From that time onwards, yatras have been very intrinsic to the rise of the Sangh Parivar. So he also participated in that. Now, my first question is, as a Prime Minister, how, as a historian who's also engaged with the history of post-independent Somnath temple, that is its reconstruction and the controversies and the developments surrounding it in 1948, 49, 50, and then finally 51, when the temple was not really inaugurated, when after its reconstruction, when it was opened to the public. So how do you react to the idea of the Prime Minister actually participating and presiding over the entire function?
You see, it is part of the same ilk. People who did not participate in the national movement but towed the British line. This is towing the British line. I will, on the Somnath, let me just explain.
Okay.
Let your viewers know what historians have understood about Somnath, what your Prime Minister is telling you, right? And historians of the caliber of Professor Romila Thapar, who took the trouble of writing a whole book on the Somnath and its history over the period. And what is the conclusion she comes to? This is a destruction that happens in the 11th century. And for the first time ever, that this notion that discard the psyche of the Hindus in creating a permanent conflict between Hindus and Muslims comes in the 19th century in the British Parliament. You see, here this is how history is being constructed. And then in 1950s, Munjes repeats the same line, that the destruction by Mahmud of Ghazni of the Somnath seared the psyche of the Hindus, right? Now, Professor Thapar says, let us look at what happened. As you know, in the medieval times, it is not only the Muslims who destroyed Hindu temples, Hindus also destroyed Buddhist temples, this, that, and the other. Destroying each other's places of worship was a routine thing, right? And people saw it also. So she finds, using multiplicity of sources, not only of one kind of source, but sources in various languages, she finds that 150 years after the destruction of the Somnath, it is rebuilt. Where it is rebuilt, no mention is made of Somnath. It is of Mahmud of Ghazni. It is of no relevance, in other words. Who destroyed it? It's rebuilt. But more important, 250 years after the destruction of the Somnath, a Muslim trader is given permission to build in the precincts of the temple a mosque with the permission of the local ruler, the priests, and the people around. Where is the hurt of the Hindu psyche? This is all a creation of the British. In fact, the language that you are hearing from your Prime Minister and from your NSA and the RSS is a language that was created for the first time in the late in the 19th century by the British. The notion that the Hindus and the Muslims are at war with each other, that they are two contending civilizations, and that they can never live with each other. The notion that they actually are constitute two different nations is an idea that comes in the 19th century, which is picked up by Savarkar and then by the Muslim League, right? Again, the notion of the atrocities and the brutality of the British is in all the writings in the 19th century by British scholars. It is that they have picked up and are not peddling as the truth. This is not what historians are agreed upon at all.
But they will say that there is an alternate set of issues. Yeah, sorry.
The use of Somnath today is precisely to create a further divide by creating a memory which did not exist, a false memory of the destruction of the Somnath, creating this Hindu-Muslim conflict. But you create a false memory that it seared the Hindu psyche, and on that basis now are planning or construct the present and also plan the future being a more polarized society so that you get electoral benefits out of it.
Yeah, in fact, I would like to quote what the Prime Minister said in the speech at the Somnath temple during the Parv. He said that forces that oppose the reconstruction of the Somnath temple in Gujarat after independence are still active. So he is trying to allude that Nehru opposed it because he, and possibly Gandhiji also, he opposed it because Gandhiji very categorically declared that no state fund would be used for the reconstruction of the temple. After Sardar Patel made that sudden suo motu declaration in 1948 during his visit there, without actually discussing it with any of his cabinet colleagues. So Gandhiji said that no state fund should be used. Also, Nehru advising the president, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, that he should not be present in his official capacity at the, after the reconstruction is over and it being thrown open to the people, he should not be present. So he is being presented as somebody who, opposed the reconstruction of the temple. Now, Mr. Modi says that those forces are still there, they're still active. So India has to remain alert and be united and powerful so as to defeat them.
You see,
now, by a statement like this, what is the meaning and how do you react to a charge which is actually against, I would say that a typical historian like you?
You see, again, it is a misrepresentation of facts. When it is being said that forces who oppose the reconstruction of the temple or the construction of the temple, nobody opposed the construction. The issue was, as you correctly said, whether a secular state should make it its business to construct either temples or mosques or girjas. It was
any place of any religious place.
That's right. It was so it was never opposed. So here again, it is being made out. You see that people oppose in other words, that the secular people are all pro-Muslim and anti-Hindu. That is not the trouble. Is that the people that you mentioned, you started with Gandhiji. They're not anti-Hindu. I mean, where is the anti-Hindu part of it? So people who are secular are being put into this docket of being Hindu, and people who are communal and have nothing to do with religion, just as Savarkar did not, or just as the louts who go about, murdering and killing and lynching. I mean, they could not be further from any religion, leave alone Hinduism.
That's right.
Now, so they are supposed to be pro-Hindu, and those who are secular and many of them believe in Hinduism, not their kind of Hinduism, but a kind, inclusive Hinduism that the Prime Minister also likes to talk about, Sarvat Dharma Sadbhav and all that. So I think that it is the political misuse being done of this issue.
Right. In my introduction, I said, very briefly that what is the the RSS or the Sangh Parivar's vision of what we as a nation are, what is really determines our nationhood. Now, I would just like to recall that ever since Mr. Modi appeared on the national stage to stake a claim to become the Prime Minister of India sometime in 2011-12, that is the time his campaign was mounted. Now, sometime in 2012, for the first time, I had heard one of his speeches where he very categorically talked about 1,000 and or a 1,200, 1,000 1200 साल की gulami. That is the phrase that was coined by him. 1,000 1,200 years of slavery. This is something which he even went and said in a stage, at a place which was as important and sacrosanct as the US Congress. Even there, while addressing the two houses, he made a similar claim that 1,000 1,200 years of slavery India has had. Now, as a historian, how do you? Clearly think that having spoken to you on numerous occasions, you would completely disagree with this. But I would like to explain to our viewers that why you would disagree with this view that the 1,000 1,200 years, that is the period of medieval India, is not Indian history. It is something foreign, alien history which
You
happened
see,
here, and we have to erase that.
to begin with, only a person with no connection with history would make a statement like either 1,000 or 1,200, as if 200 years make no difference. Sometimes you say 1,000 years,
Sometimes 1,000, sometimes 1,200. That is what I have.
what difference does 200 years make, isn't it? Huh? I mean,
Yeah.
that's your respect for history. But that apart, what is happening is a conflation of two notions of empire. Hmm? I
Mhm.
mean, this is something that historians have discarded, put in the dustbin, that all empires are not the same. The Egyptian Empire and the Mughal Empire and the Mauryan Empire and the British Empire are not the same things. you know, the pre-modern empires are a completely different phenomenon altogether compared to empires that emerge after the rise of capitalism, where the imperial power exploits and extracts surplus from the colony. Now, this critical aspect did not happen in the pre British period. There was no
Mm.
extraction of surplus. As for people from outside coming in, if that were the criteria, then you may as well talk of 5,000 years of colonial rule. The Aryan invasions, you can talk of 55,000 years of colonial rule. The migration from Central Asia, from Iran, from Africa into India. Any genetic history will tell you that migrations have occurred globally. You know,
Mm.
so are we then going to go back and say that this is all colonial rule? What distinguishes colonial from non-colonial? If a people come into a region, settle down, and live there for centuries, hmm, they cannot be considered colonial, and that's what the Mughals did, for example. Not all the invaders stayed back. After all, Alexander also invaded. The Greeks
Mm.
also invaded. So many, the Greeks, the Bactrians, just name it, Afghans, Turks, Mongols, right? Some of them decided to stay here and, in fact, contributed enormously to the development, both economic, political, cultural, architectural, in every sphere. How can we call them foreign? By what definition? Islam came to India when the Prophet was still alive. Christianity came to India with the set of the first disciples. One of the oldest religions in India, are both Islam and Christianity. How can we call them foreign? They came centuries before the word Hindu was even even coined, and we are calling them
Mm.
foreign, and the so-called Hindu as the indigenous. I mean, this whole business of indigenous versus foreign. This is racism. You see, this is what leads to the kinds of genocides you're witnessing the world over today. You know, we are the real occupants, and the others are foreign. The Gazan people are foreign. They must be thrown out. you know.
But in common parlance, whenever India's past is being discussed, if there is anybody from the RSS, they're either a leader or even a junior cadre, somebody who's just a foot soldier of the RSS, a Swayamsevak, they say that India had a very glorious Hindu past, and which was actually dismantled by the invaders who came and established a thousand years or millennium long period of Muslim period in India came, and finally after 1947 has the Hindu India asserted itself, and now we are going to, in fact, Mr. Modi, again referring to him, he's talked about the next 1000 years, which is going to be the period of glorious resurgence of what we originally were. Without
Amrit,
using the word Hindu, he said that. So, as a historian, why would you say that the medieval era is not a Muslim period?
you see, to begin with, this notion of the glorious past, as uh, this
Hmm.
book by, uh, you know, How Fascism Works has
Hmm.
shown that almost all countries which have Jason Stanley's book, he's the Yale professor who wrote this book, How Fascism Works, and he's compared many countries. And he
Right.
showed a strict pattern on how countries which are moving in the direction of fascism, what do they do? Hmm? They start with this
Mhm.
notion of great, glorious past, in which certain people are not included, only a section are included.
Okay.
In fact, certain people are seen as a danger to the bringing back of the glorious past, and therefore they
Hmm.
have to eliminated or removed, etc. So this is quite common. Fact of the matter is, the glory there was indeed a glorious past of in the Indian civilization, but
Right.
what they refer to is not the glorious part of it. You
Okay.
know, there were many things that were wrong in ancient India, as there would be in any other ancient part of the world. There was virtual slavery in the name of the caste system, hmm,
Right.
which they completely deny.
Hmm.
In the readings by the RSS, caste does not exist. It's something that these foreigners brought
True.
in. Ancient India did not have caste. So, first, as I said, there was no glorious past in that sense, but there were various elements in our past which were of considerable uh, on with which we could have considerable pride. For
Hmm.
example, the kind of past that people like Jawaharlal Nehru would refer back to in his discovery of India, that we
Hmm.
had a great dialogical tradition, the ability to
Right.
live with difference, debate, hmm, openness to the world, learning from all
Okay.
over the world, and things like that. Those were, and all the scientific, and as Nehru and Amartya Sen have both
Scientific
shown,
development, yes.
all the all the breakthroughs that occurred, they occurred in the periods then of openness that we had in the ancient past, and they did not occur in the periods when we tried to close ourselves down. So their handing of the ancient past is faulty for these two reasons, right?
Hmm.
They do not look at the faults, and they do not know how to recognize what was the good about it. The second thing is their demonization of the medieval past is complete rubbish. Hmm?
Hmm.
I mean, it has, there is absolutely no historical evidence to suggest the demonization of the past. As I said, if you look at the economy, the Indian economy did better than any other part of the world in the medieval period. By the end of the
Hmm.
Mughal period, India was producing 8 times the GDP of Britain and nearly a quarter of the world's GDP. It doesn't happen if you have brutality and murder that is happening all around you. It requires a lot of economic and political stability to produce that kind of thing. In other words, India was again at the end of at the end of Mughal rule. India was the world's largest manufacturer of textiles and exporter of
Right.
textiles. So economically, culturally, architecturally. I mean, of course, they would say that Taj Mahal was built by Samudragupta and Qutub Minar by somebody else. The, if you forget about that kind of imagination, then again, architecturally, in music, in literature, the whole Sufi and Bhakti movements, they occur in the Mughal period, both in the Hindu and the Muslim side.
And
The
the
second
Bhakti movement as well as the Sufi
medieval
culture is actually not appreciated by the conservative forces in both the religious communities. This is something which we have to underscore every time that we speak about them. So, what you all have said, that the medieval period, it is wrong to classify it or label it as a Muslim period. Uh, Not just the progress which happened in India and the very epic levels that economy touched, Indian economy prior to colonial forces entering India. There was also this amount, was there also any element of the ruling elite, not just being one religion, just focused on only the Muslims, or were the ruling elite also drawn from the Hindus?
You see, this characterization of a period on the basis of the religion of the ruler is born out of their imagination. You know, this is not how
Right.
historians characterize periods. World over, you characterize periods as ancient, medieval, early modern, post-modern, depending on the nature of society, not on the nature of the religion of the ruler. Sometimes a Muslim ruler can be great, sometimes a Muslim ruler need not be. And the same is true for the Hindu ruler. But just because the religion of the ruler is Muslim, it doesn't become Muslim rule. It doesn't become Muslim society. As you said, the elite did not belong only to the Muslims, and neither did we in the Mughal period have only Muslim rulers. So this is all their imagination altogether.
Having studied, the literature and various facets related to the Sangh Parivar, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar was the first real ideologue of the RSS. He's in fact treatise Essentials of Hinduism was what actually led to him getting inspired to form the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh in 1925. Now, in many ways, Savarkar was also obsessed with the idea of history. He actually, provided or rather codified the idea of Hindutva, which was also there prior to him writing the book. Now, in that Essentials of Hinduism, he writes that Hindutva is not a word but a history, not the spiritual or religious history of our people at times as it is mistaken to be by being confounded with the other cognate term Hinduism, but a history in full. As a historian, how do what do you make out of this phrase called Hindutva is history in full? What is
As
he
I,
trying to say?
you know, I am not a scholar of Savarkar, neither would I ever wish to be. But from little that I can understand, what he probably means as Hinduism being the full, and not just the religious part.
Hindutva. Hindutva
Hindutva,
is history in full.
history in full, is precisely is the overdetermination by religion of every aspect of society. That your religion determines your politics, your economics, your culture, your language, everything. That is what he means by Hindutva being being history in full, and that is what we are contesting. Religion is just one aspect of society at every period of time.
There's also another very problematic sentence which we find not in Savarkar's writing, but you have this book called The Bunch of Thoughts, which is actually series of articles or various speeches which were delivered by M.S. Golwalkar over the years. Now, when the first edition of the book came out, in the late 50s and 60s, at that time, there was a gentleman, a scholar of some repute of that time, M.A. Venkat Rao. He was asked by the publishers to write an introduction to the book. Now, what he wrote in that, I found something very, interesting and possibly, you know, in a short, actually emphasize saying that what really is there is the RSS viewpoint of the medieval period. Says that the failure of Indian history to assimilate the Muslims into the national society as it had succeeded in assimilating the earlier invaders, that is the Sharks, Scythians and Hunas, that is what Hunas is written, is a notable fact which the new Indian leaders of national liberation ignored altogether. So the new leaders of national liberation are obviously Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, and the others, all that one can think of. But the point is that assimilation of Muslims was not done as we did of the previous lot. Now, again, as a historian, how would you react to this claim? This assimilation was missing, whereas we assimilated the previous. Is it necessary for a nation to assimilate anybody who comes in, and do the today's people who share the same today's Muslims, are they any way connected with those who are the actual people who came and invaded this particular territory?
You see, the reason why they are the least uh, the least competent to talk about Indian history is because they distort and destroy what is the best in Indian history. What contrasts Indian history with very many other parts of the world is precisely this: the refusal to attempt to assimilate and homogenize. All right, and their understanding. I mean, look at our understanding of Indian nationalism. It was unique in world history. When nation states emerged all over the world, they emerged on the basis of one language, one religion. Catholic France, Protestant England, unification of Germany on the basis of language, and so on and so forth. And at that time, India imagines a nation which celebrates diversity. There is no question of, assimilation in that sense. Of course, the assimilation that occurred, natural assimilation in the sense of both sides assimilating and learning from and absorbing elements from each other, did happen, and that is what made both Islam and Hinduism in India much richer for that reason. But this notion, the notion that they have of assimilation, is the notion which Hitler had or which Mussolini had. You see, of this homogeneous one religion, one language. Hindi, Hindu, Hindutva. The very slogan tells you all. You see, now that is not India at all. It is certainly not India of the last 100 years. That is the national movement period. Neither is it the India of the ancient past. Neither is it the India of Akbar. Or there's so many others.
So India is actually a very heterogeneous society, and what about this tendency which is there and which is actually one of the most worrying fact of contemporary period, is that looking at the Muslims of contemporary India as being responsible for the alleged deeds done in the past. Can today's Muslims be any way held responsible for that?
But this is so absurd. I mean, who in today's civilized world even talks this language? If you were to do that, then the handful of red Indians that are left, the original Indians that are left in the United States, to destroy every American, because they are all, after all, children of invaders. No, this is a language. It's a medieval language, the Dark Ages language of revenge. That's why I said the NSA saying so is amazing. What is the language we should be learning? The language that the Mahatma taught us, that you do not hate the British, you hate imperialism as a system, and that is why, as you know, that after independence, the British were amazed that there was no hostility towards them as people, So that is what we should be learning, rather than this notion of Akbar ke aulad ko chun chun ke marenge. No, Akbar nahi, Babar ke aulad ko chun chun ke marenge. What a slogan! What a horrible slogan! Everybody becomes Babar's aulad.
Anybody who is a Muslim, that is what was
Nobody becomes
alluded to.
the aulad of Raja Harsha, who demolishes many monasteries. This selective memory of history is amazing.
Just to mention, for the benefit of our viewers, the Chinese pilgrims who visited India in the 7th, 8th centuries, at that time, there are written accounts of them having visited what is today's contemporary Ayodhya. They refer to it as Oyuto. They did refer to Buddhist stupas existing there. They even went to, of all places, they also went to this village, is actually where Prime Minister Modi was also born. That is also a village which was on the journey. So they did notice at that time Buddhist stupas all over. It is quite possible that at some point in the future, a very militant Buddhist movement might develop in India. What then are they going to then seek the demolition of all existing Hindu temples at those sites and the reconstruction of Buddhist temples or stupas? That is what is going to be demanded. So we really cannot keep on rolling back history as it is said. But having said that, there's one aspect which we need to really understand. What do we as a country, what do we as citizens understand what is our history? The way it is actually formed is by education, by what is taught in schools, what is taught in colleges, what is researched, what is publicized, what is written up. Now, the first time that the RSS fraternity in any way remotely came in political power was in 1977 when the Janata Party period was formed. Right at that time, there was an attempt uh, to change certain history textbooks. The curriculum of various history textbooks were sought to be changed. We saw this on a more organized manner happening in the 6 year period that Mr. Vajpayee was the prime minister between 1998 and 2004. And we have seen this, remorselessly happening since 2014 and 24. What impact would this have on the collective thinking, collective understanding of India and its citizens?
Let me take you back. You've given a very good summary of what they've done. That is, whenever they've come close to state power, which was
Right.
in 77, because the Janata Party actually allowed the RSS to merge themselves in it, is the first time they launched an attack on secular history. But you're
Right.
omitting the period before that. You see, after independence, after the murder of the Mahatma, when the RSS was banned, the condition on which they were released was that they will not do any political work. They said we will be only doing cultural work. And their cultural work involved setting up these Saraswati Shishu Mandirs, the
That's right.
schools. The first one was set up in 1951. And today, if you look at their website of Vidya Bharati, they will tell you that there are RSS schools in more than 90% of districts in India. So they've spread their tentacles all over. And what were they teaching? If you will give me a couple of minutes, I want to just give you some
Yes,
examples
please.
of what a study of the NCERT itself found. It a study done in the 1990s. They found what was being taught in the RSS schools, and it will tell you what the danger is, why messing with history is so dangerous. This is
Mhm.
from a textbook called Gaurav Gatha for class 4, published by Saraswati Shishu Mandir. How do they describe the Muslims? Wherever they went, they had a sword in their hand. Their army went like a storm in all four directions. Any country that came in their way was destroyed. Houses of prayer, universities were destroyed, libraries were burned, religious books were destroyed, mothers and sisters were humiliated, mercy and justice was unknown to them.
Mhm.
Who's saying this? Those who destroy the Babri Masjid, those who burn the Bhandarkar library, those who humiliate mothers and sisters in 2002 in Gujarat are telling you that Muslims are like this. And similarly about Christians, and of course, I mean, the text contains things like Qutub Minar is today famous in Qutubuddin Aibak's name, but actually it was built by Samudragupta. Its name was Vishnu Stamba, and so on and so forth. There are millions of such completely funny stuff. But about Christians, another book. It says it is because of the conspiratorial policies followed by this religion that India was partitioned. So partition of India is because of Christians. Even today, Christian missionaries are engaged in fostering anti-national tendencies in Nagaland, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Bihar, Kerala, and other regions of the country,
Mhm.
because of which there is a grave danger to the integrity of present India. Now, what are you doing? Tender minds, 8 year, 9-year olds, you're teaching this. As as was studies of the Gujarat riots have shown, and many scholars, people like Tista Sital Bad, had been arguing that if you do not deal with the textbooks, what is being taught to school children, a Godhra is just waiting to happen. People who will murder their neighbors and feel that they've achieved a great nationalist task. Out of these textbooks, having collated them, NCERT came to the following conclusion. The main purpose of these books would serve is to gradually transform the young children who came into these schools to study into bigoted morons in the garb of instilling patriotism in them. You see, everything was great in our past, and everything is wrong in the other, is all that is being taught in these schools. Now, this was happening in the RSS schools. But RSS schools were not the only schools. That is where 77 comes in. It is to prevent the spread of this kind of stuff, which was very injurious to Indian society, that the National Integration Council in the 1960s asked the NCERT, to produce books which were not communal, which were secular, and which were anti-colonial. Because before that, you had either colonial or communal books, right? And the tallest scholars in India. And it is the first in the world. Nowhere in the world will you have people of the stature of Ramila Thapar, Bipin Chandra, Satish Chandra writing for class 6, class 7, class 8. Nowhere. They produced outstanding textbooks recognized as such by everyone in the world. It is these books they attacked in 1977, as you correctly mentioned. But India was a different country at that time. There were protests all over the country, including in the NCERT. And they could not go ahead they said ban these books. The books could not be banned. Next time around, when they came close to power, 1999-2004, as you correctly said, is when they first tried to delete portions of these books. Again, there was a protest. We ourselves participated in one and produced a book, Communalization of Indian History, in which people from K.R. Narayanan, the president, to Amartya Sen, to almost every major editor of the country contributed, saying that this is wrong. But nevertheless, they went ahead and produced a set of books, which was really poor and communal. And again, the Indian History Congress asked three people, Professor Irfan Habib, myself, and Suvira Jaiswal, to look into these books. And we looked into them and produced a whole book called The Index of Errors. Just factual mistakes apart from the communal tinge in these books. So in 2004, these books were removed. And now a whole bunch of scholars, now groups of scholars, so that nobody could say any one individual's bias is coming in, chosen from the best universities in the country, produced the new textbooks. Right. It is these books which are now being attacked, not the Romulus or Bipin Chandra books. Those books had been removed. It is these books produced by a series of scholars from all over the country, which now they are in 2023 using the same technique as they did in 1999-2000. In 1999-2000, a book was produced by the RSS in which they said there should be 43 deletions from books by R.S. Sharma, Ramila Thapar, etc. Remove references to caste oppression, remove this, remove that, etc. 43. NCERT, virtually the next day, removes 42, 43 elements. It was direct
extremely alert.
Similarly, now there is an institution called the Public Policy Research Center, which is headed by Sumit Bhasin, who is the convener of the e-training cell of the BJP. In 2021, they produced a document saying Indian history is full of distortions, etc. We must redo our history. And now come the cuts and the changes in the textbooks, which are horrendous by any stretch of imagination, where they virtually removed the entire Mughal period, several centuries, where the Pakistanization of Indian textbooks. What they do in Pakistan is what we are doing here now. Remove wherever you can any reference to Muslims. And when they were questioned about it, the NCERT director said, this was rationalization because the children's bags had become too heavy. So we had to reduce. I'll give you an example of reduction. From the political science textbook, there is a para on the making of the Indian Constitution, where there's a line which says that many people like Gandhiji, like Vallabhbhai Patel, like Jawaharlal Nehru, and Maulana Azad and others contributed to the making of the Indian Constitution by heading various committees.
Right.
They dropped Maulana Azad. Two words removed, to lighten the bag. So it is motivated. It is erase and demonize the Muslims, which is what is going
The
on at the moment. And
Muslims have not contributed even one bit to this nation because they are not part of this nation. That is the basic argument which is being made by them. We have also seen in the last few years, especially under this regime, mythology being treated as history. This has been actually said by a person who was appointed as no less than the chairman of the Indian Council of Historical Research way back in 2014 and 15, which shows the kind of earnestness. So, the last question is that it is often said, that history is written by the winners. So if these are the winners, then is this the history of this country that will be there with us for future?
sorry, history is the.
I said that it has been said, that history is always written by the winners, by the person who wins. The losers do not get to write the history. Now, if that is actually true, then the history that we have that is being taught in the classrooms and in society being propagated, and if these people continue to be winners, will then this be the history that we will be left with?
You see, this adage that you referred to could apply to the medieval times.
Right.
The Raja writes his own history and doesn't write the history of the peasantry and the working class. I mean, you have to be a little nutty to think that you can, in today's world,
Now.
to write a history which says the Taj Mahal is Tejo Mahal. The whole world has studied it. There is evidence which is on the net which you cannot run away with. Only thing you can do is you can make your own children into morons, but other people's children, other countries are still going to study the Taj Mahal as Taj Mahal, not as Tejo Mahal. You see, as Ravila Thapar said in an interview, that if this is what you go on doing, then Indian children to study Indian history will have to go abroad. But Indian history is not going to change. So this attempt is itself ludicrous, it's dangerous, it's ludicrous, it pushes us back, but it certainly cannot end and change the course of history. If this delusion that they will create a new history is really a delusion.
Well, thank you very much. You actually said, Indian history will not be changed despite whatever they might be trying to do. And what you referred to, Professor Romila Thapar said, I think it is already happening. We are seeing the rising number of Indians, whoever can afford, are actually no longer enrolling themselves in the Indian universities, but are going abroad and studying. It's a second new phase and a different type of brain drain that we are witnessing in India. Thank you very much, Professor Aditya Mukherjee, for joining in this program and actually talking about the distorted, the centrality of distorted history for the Sangh Parivar to increase their political clout in this country. Thank you very much.